Hello, dear friends. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is From a Place of Self. My name is Dayal Gurunga, and I'm extraordinarily grateful and happy that you're here with me. This is a podcast for you to take a moment in your day, a moment in your week, a moment in this season of life, and just do it with me here for a second. Breathe. Take an inhale. Recenter yourself. Reconnect to what's going on in the inner space. So much of when we talk about what's going on in our lives, how are you doing? We talk about what's going on around us, what's happening to us, the events that are taking place in our life. Oh, what I did last weekend, the travel I have planned coming up, what's going on at work, etc. And so much of our life gets defined by the external circumstances, what's going on in the political world, what's going on in whatever it might be. And it's not always the case that we are given the opportunity or are encouraged or feel like we even have the tools and resources to reflect what's going on at a deeper level internally, which is actually what's generating and creating our experience of life. And I've been reading this book by Dr. Richard Schwartz called You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, and sharing some snippets from that book that I think are helpful for us, specifically in the context of relationships, because relationships are those spaces where our inner world gets reflected back to us in a way that can sometimes be so confronting or scary that we don't even want to look at it. And so what do? We blame the other person. They're the issue. They're the problem. I hate them. They're challenging. And there are challenging people in the world. I am one of them. But what we miss the opportunity of sometimes, and what this podcast is for, what this message for you right now for, the invitation we have every day is for, is to be able to take a step inward, make a U-turn, and put the focus on ourselves and ask the question, simple question, helpful question every day, what's going on in my inner space right now? And that could be a scary question because so much of our lives are often mechanisms. So much of how we operate in the world is actually mechanisms that have been intentionally designed by parts of ourselves to make sure we never have to confront that. The internal family systems model separates parts within us into protectors and exiles. So exiles are the ones that carry deep shame, vulnerability, pain, loss, loneliness, extreme feelings or beliefs of unworthiness, unlovability, unimportance, abandonment, etc. And our protectors are the parts of us that jump in to do what their role says, to protect either those parts from ever getting hurt again or having to experience that rejection or humiliation ever again. So I'm going to make sure I'm so perfect that no one's ever going to reject me. I'm going to make sure that I'm so needed by being so responsible, by being so amenable, by being so funny, by being so intelligent, by being so responsive to any request that's needed, that no one's ever going to get rid of me or discard me or reject me ever again. I'm going to make my body look a certain way. I'm going to have a certain weight and make my skin a certain way. And I'm going to control my diet in a certain way. I'm going to be beautiful enough and dress a certain way so that I'll never have to experience the pain and rejection of humiliation again. And so parts of us kick into gear, and so much that we just kind of deem, and that's just who I am as part of my personality, is not the essence of who we are. They are part of who we've become, but it's not the essence of who we are. It's parts of ourselves that were lunged into action, catapulted into action in order to respond to a deep wound that took place earlier on in our life. And the IFS model invites us, and not just the IFS model, any holistic therapeutic approach, any spiritually grounded perspective of how to heal internally allows us to look inside and say, what's really me and what's not? Is that me at my essence, or is that behaviors that were adopted in order to respond to a compromising or painful situation early on? And relationships are where we get that mirror that's so close because it's where we get the most vulnerable. It's where we have the highest expectations. It's where we think all of that pain and shame and guilt or loneliness or disconnection is going to get resolved. And on a spiritual level, we know, and I'll share with you, that there is a God shaped hole in the heart of all of us. And there is a sense where it was Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare wrote when he quoted Juliet to speak to Romeo, "You are the god of my idolatry." Meaning, I've substituted that God shaped hole in my heart with you, baby. And you're going to be the one that fills it. And the honeymoon phase that we experience in relationships, some of us have the honeymoon phase at the beginning of relationships, before relationships, at the end of relationships. We have this fantasy built up that once I find the right person, I'm going to be enough. I'm going to be connected. And fill in the right person with whatever it may be for you. Once I have the right career, once I have whatever it might be. But really, what's taking place is there's a need, there's someone inside of us, or someone's inside of us, a part of us inside of us, that's just dying for your attention, that's dying for you to acknowledge them. And the lies that we tell ourselves, or that parts of us believe, is that there is no you inside that can handle that. There is no compassionate, grounded, connected you. You're weak. You're incapable. And that's because they don't know you. They only know the wounded young 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 17-year-old, 23-year-old that got dumped or hurt or rejected or abused or yelled at or left behind or abandoned, right? But that, again, is not the real essence of you. And every spiritual tradition recognizes this. In the Bhagavad Gita, we talk about the nature of the Atma, or the nature of the self. And in various spiritual traditions, the idea of the soul that is eternal and connected and is imbued with the innate qualities that allow you to be the natural leader of your system. In ACA or ACOA or 12-step programs for codependency, or in the inner child world of healing, we call it reparenting ourselves. But who's doing the reparenting? The one doing the reparenting is yourself with a capital S, your real essence. The one that was never traumatized, the one that was never rejected, the one who is connected to a higher source and a higher power and has all the resources available to them to heal what's going on the inside. And it just begins with awareness. It just begins with an awareness and a remembrance of that eternal you, that eternal self. And a willingness to take that U-turn and look internally. And so I want to read this short snippet from this book by Richard Schwartz, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, and allow it to hopefully encourage you on your journey to release the idea that I'm going to solve the inner problems of my life by manipulating or changing the external circumstances in a way that are just right. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to make external changes in our life, that we don't get to be ambitious, that we don't have to have goals, that we don't have to have desires and likes and preferences of how we live our life. That's what makes us human, and that's what makes life beautiful in a way. But there also has to be this balance of making sure it's centered and grounded in a awareness of self. So he says, here, I'm just going to read this section about being the primary caretaker of your inner parts. He says that the first step towards the goal of unloading the pain and shame that drive these types of behaviors of trying to turn people into projects and force them into supportive roles in my life, to be the savior, to be the fixer, to be the whole filler, is to shift our focus. Most of us scramble to avoid our inner life. My God, can I relate to that statement? I live in New York City, in the United States of America. We are the capital of avoiding our inner life by filling it with nightlife, by filling it with busyness, by filling it with on to the next thing, right? Just step into Times Square and you think, this is the epicenter of avoiding your inner life. Not as a criticism. I've been to Times Square. I go to Broadway shows. There are things that we can do in life that make life spicy and meaningful. But we have to make sure we're balancing it with that internal focus. And if our whole life is just one big avoidance of self, we run into the situations we often find ourselves in. The other end of those roads are the depression, the anxiety, the loneliness, the dissatisfaction that we feel. So, most of us scramble to avoid our inner life and keep our attention fixed on external solutions that include finding or changing a designated redeemer. Fill in the right person you're looking for, your partner. I try to get couples to do a complete U-turn in their focus, moving them toward rather than away from the inner worlds in which they fear to tread. When people listen deeply inside, they encounter a host of different feelings, fantasies, thoughts, impulses, and sensations that make up the background noise of our everyday experience of being in the world. When people remain focused on and ask questions of one of those inner experiences, they find that it is more than merely a transient thought or emotion. Within each of us is a complex family of subpersonalities, which I call parts. These parts are the reasons we can simultaneously have so many contradictory and confusing needs. The American poet Walt Whitman got it right in Song of Myself, where he speaks, quote, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes," end quote. So do we all contain multitudes. Thus, the Oracle of Delphi's admonition to know thyself should really be to know thyself. So this is your invitation. If you needed it today, whatever that looks like to you, to make sure you find a little space. Journaling is a great practice. I've always been averse to journaling. I don't do it as much as I like to or recommend for other people. But whether it's journaling, whether it's in your meditation, whether it's just a walk in nature, whether it's just some time to reflect, pull off to the side of the road, stop doing the dishes, and just sit in a chair and be with yourself after this podcast, and just ask the question, what inside me needs a little bit of attention? And don't overdo it. Don't think you're going to be the Indiana Jones that swoops in and rescues everything internally. That might be above the pay grade of what is capable in this moment, because sometimes we rush too much in and we try to do it all at once. And that's just a manager part within us that thinks, I'm going to do all the healing today, right now, and get it done with so I can move on with my life. Patience is an aspect of self. Presence is an aspect of self. Being willing to trust the timeline of our own healing journey and not feeling like we're too far behind, or it's not moving fast enough, or it's going too slow, whatever it might be. But just your system has the inner wisdom to know, and just the awareness that there are a multitude of parts within me that have competing strategies and emotions and feelings at times, and they all just need some loving attention. They know what's needed. They know where we need to go next. And what may work for me may not work for you, and vice versa. So don't think that there's a cookie cutter response of how you're supposed to soothe your parts and what it looks like. Some of us need stillness. Some of us need movement. Some of us need reassurance. Some of us need action and accountability. It manifests in different ways. But the most important message today, in every podcast that I do, and every message and everything that I'll ever share, is to find that space today to look in your inner world and ask what's going on, what's needed, what's driving this right now. Is there something I'm afraid to look at? Is the tension and the turmoil that's taking place in my outer world reflective of something that I need to look at more closely in my inner world? The tension with my partner, the frustration with a lack of finding a partner, whatever it may be, take the opportunity to make sure that you're looking in that inner space. You'll never regret it, and it will always put you in a better place to address whatever's going on out there. I promise. I love you. I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning in, sharing this experience with me. I'm on the journey with you, wishing you well and sending you lots of love always. Bye bye.